Hey y'all! Happy non-binary day! Today, I thought I would read you the introduction to No Man of Woman Born by Ana Mardoll. If you haven't heard me rave about this book before, it is the queerest book I've ever read. My favorite short story collection, possibly one of my favorite books of all time. It is such a good book. It is a collection of short stories set in fantasy worlds that is all centered around non-binary and trans characters, and it is stunning. One of my favorite parts of this book, though, is Anna's introduction. He talks about the title of the book and how it came about due to, like, Macbeth, and how no man born of woman, something like that, would be able to defeat Macbeth, and then Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped, so he wasn't born of woman. And so he wrote this collection kind of against that idea of, what if it's a woman? What if it's a non-binary character? What if, actually, like, the person you were born out of isn't a woman? So that is the premise of this collection. I do have his permission to read the introduction, and also a note before I begin on this. On Twitter, he says he uses he, him pronouns, and refers to himself as a trans guy. However, the book does not do that, so I will be using trans boy in replacement of any other gender descriptions that he has in the introduction from when this book was published. Also, I realize I do not have an audiobook narrator's voice. I would not be a very good one. And I promise you, like, get this book, read it. It is so much better when you do that. But just the introduction, just this author's note, made me fall in love with this book. Fantasy novels were my escape as a child. On cold or rainy days when the world closed in around me and my chronic pain flared up, I hid under my pink duvet clutching a library book and read until my troubles were forgotten. Peter Pan, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lord of the Rings, Dragonlance, and Piers Anthony's Xanth series formed my childhood. The complete works of Patricia C. Reedy, which had been banned from my household as the wrong kind of magical fantasy for good Christian girls to enjoy, were my first purchase when I moved from my parents' house into a place of my own. Talking dragons and magical witches and daring swordsmen were everything to me, and carried me through good times and bad. My first attempts at creative writing were based in fantasy worlds, yet every time I started a new work, the project would stall. For all that I loved high fantasy settings, I didn't feel I had anything to add. My focus shifted to fairy tales where I could explore domestic violence in my Beauty and the Beast retelling, Pulchritude, and to urban paranormal in my Earthside series, where I write queer and disabled protagonists who escape from abusive situations to find freedom and a supportive community whose members who share their marginalized identities. In short, I wrote where I felt my voice could have the most impact, and high fantasy remained on my reading stack for pleasurable escapism only. What I hadn't anticipated when I set out to change the world with my writing was how much my writing would change me. Between publishing Poison Kiss and Survival Route, I realized the transgender and non-binary gender characters I'd included in my fiction carried within them large parts of myself. I came out as trans to my friends, and a weight lifted from my shoulders. All the messy, confusing, complicated gender feelings I'd carried with me for so long had a name, a label, and a community. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't the only one. I was happier than I'd ever been. After the heady rush of coming out had passed, I looked at my reading stack and saw with a pang how often I wasn't included in those fantasy worlds. I spent many a night peering at The Lord of the Rings and wondering who among the cast I could imagine as a trans boy with pronouns like mine. I realized I did have words I wanted to add to the fantasy genre. I set aside the Earthside draft I'd been working on and started a new project. I would write stories I needed to read, each with a transgender character who was the hero of their own tale. My words would be chosen for fellow trans people seeking escapism. I didn't want to provide Gender Theory 101 or write big coming-out discussions for each character. Their gender would be the same as for cis characters: real, valid, and affirmatively theirs. I wanted to write the stories I'd needed as a trans child hiding with a book under a pink duvet. No Man of Woman Born is the name both of this collection and one of the stories within. The title comes from a trope of prophecies in fantastical settings where an event which seems impossible nevertheless comes to pass because of a loophole in the rule. J.R.R. Tolkien is popularly, and possibly apocryphally, believed to have created the character of Éowyn, Shield Maiden of Rohan, and Slayer of the Witch King of Angmar, who can be killed by no man, after being irritated by Shakespeare's weak resolution to the no man that's born of woman prophecy in Macbeth. After all, if no man born of woman can accomplish a given task, that seems like an excellent time to bring in a woman to do the job, rather than introducing a man who isn't born of a woman simply because he was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. Whether or not this origin story for Éowyn is true, the tale has stuck with me. Éowyn was one of the first female characters in a fantasy setting I read as a child, and was formative in many ways for me. She dressed as a man, and rode to battle as a man, and fought as a man, but she was no man herself. She proclaims her gender on the battlefield, but no living man am I, you look upon a woman, and everyone believes her. She doesn't have to argue or explain or justify herself. She simply states what her gender is and is not. Éowyn is written as a cis woman, of course, and this is a privilege cis people have that trans people do not in our society. The privilege to have one's gender accepted and not considered a matter for debate. Yet what if she were not cis? What if she were assigned female at birth like me, but neither a man nor a woman? What if she were both? What if she were a trans woman and the prophecy knew even if those around her didn't? Where were stories about those characters? Trans heroes and heroines whose genders broke, subverted, and fulfilled prophecies as neatly as Éowyn's gender fulfilled the prophecy about the Witch King of Angmar. The stories I've written here do just that. Break, subvert, and fulfill the same gendered prophecies that cis characters have encountered since the dawn of storytelling. The heroes and heroines in these pages aren't special because they are trans, they are special and they are trans. They face trials and tribulations as any character does, and emerge triumphant. No trans character is killed in the pages that follow. None are dead named, and misgendering is kept to a minimum. The assigned genders at birth of the non-binary characters are not revealed unless necessary. Trigger warnings are provided before each story, as well as pronunciation guides for neopronouns used by non-binary characters. Wherever possible, I have tried to make this collection accessible to trans readers, with cis audiences welcomed but not centered. These are the stories I needed to read, sent out into the wider world for anyone else who might need them too. I just really love this book, y'all. That is literally all I'm going to do today. I hope you pick up this book because it is so, so beautiful. I adore it with every fiber of my being. And I will see you sometime. Goodbye.